Hey everyone, I'm Airwingmarine. Welcome back to the channel and my next Escape from Tarkov video. We're going to do a quick economic update. They made a bunch of updates to the hideout and barters today, so we've seen some things get turned on their head. So without wasting any more time, let's jump right into it. Before we dive into the items, just a couple of quick things to get out of the way. First off, these videos are intended just to give you a guide and maybe show you a couple items you don't know are worthwhile. Under no circumstances should you throw an item out if your bag isn't full. The idea here is if your bag is full and you come across more loot, you know what to get rid of versus what not to get rid of. One of the things that I use for a guideline is 12.5 thousand rubles. If something is worth less than that, I don't keep it. If it's worth more than that, I keep it. So that helps you draw a line between things so that you know, okay, it's worth keeping a flat screwdriver, but it's not worth keeping a, let's say, battery, right? You have the battery in your bag and you know it's below 12.5, you throw it out for something you know is above 12.5. It's just a nice, easy reference point to base off of so you can make quick decisions. So let's get right into this. I've got these things divided up kind of how they're grouped so we can talk about them. First things first, food. Condensed milk, herring, Tarcola, squash, and crackers. These things are almost always worth keeping, but I like mentioning them in case there's somebody new to the video. Tarcola and squash and herring are used for the holodink, the cooler barter. This guy right here, you get it from Jaeger. You can see you got hot rods, Tarcolas, herrings, and squash. So that's why those maintain their value. They're using a couple of crafts too, which do it, but that's the big reason. Condensed milk just sells to therapists for a bunch, and Jaeger too. So that's why it's always worth taking out. It's worth that 15,000 period. You find it, pick it up, hang on to it. Crackers. Now these things are used in a couple of crafts, so they always pretty much maintain the value, but you're not going to see them get much above 14.5 just because you can buy them from therapists. But we'll see. You might see them get more expensive with some of the changes they've made. Now, speaking of changes, they made a bunch of changes to barters and crafts today and a couple of purchases as well. So you're going to see a huge swing in prices for a couple of days as things get crazy. And I'll try to get you out in front of them, but they're not going to last forever. The first one is Slicker's bars. And as you can see, these things were selling for like 7,000, 8,000 before. Now they're almost double. And the reason behind that is, let's pull up the required searches, is because now you need them for the scav vest, which you need for the Punisher task, or for crafting Cordura, or Ripstop, one or the other. It's now needed for the Attack 2 backpack, which you see 3, and as well as the weapon case now. You got Slickers mixed into the middle here for a weapon case. So that's what pushed these up. So you can craft them and probably make a little bit of money or just find them in raid. They're worth keeping. And this is what makes Oat Flakes worth keeping as well now too. People are buying these things up and you're seeing some swings. So this kind of fits more in a maybe keep, but I saw these things at 25, 30,000 earlier this morning when they first made the changes. So just kind of keep an eye on it, see what they're doing. They may not be worth keeping. And lastly, Amelia Rye. These things are going to get really, really, really expensive now. And there's a couple of reasons for this. First, we'll look at the barters. So they added a sugar barter. So 5 of these now for sugar. So you're going to see a huge spike in these things. But on top of that, there's kind of a chain here. And I'll do it real quick. I'll just kind of talk about it. But what it is they changed the M1 rig barter. So instead of just 4 aquamaries, you need 4 aquamaries and a kvass. And the reason that's important is because in your hideout, you actually make kvasses. And to make kvasses, you need the Amelia Rye croutons. Where is it? Right there. So it's 4 of these. So again, these are going to be worth keeping, taking them out of raid, which they weren't before. Just make sure you watch your flea market fee on them. It can get kind of expensive. Now into electronics. This might seem like a no-brainer, but there's a couple of things I want to mention. One, CPUs are absolute gold. Even if you find these in outer raid, you can use them to make graphics cards, so they're worth sticking in your secure container. Circuit boards, again, worth a ton of money. You can craft them or you can find them in raid. CPU fans, same deal, worth a ton of money, so keep them. Pretty much anything you can get out of the computers now is worth money, but about half of it's worth a ton. So places like Reserve, Shoreline in the admin building, or Interchange that have lots of computers are worth checking. There's also a couple of computers in dorms you can check, and some of the other buildings that are on custom. So if you see a CPU or a computer sitting on the ground, make sure you check it. It can be worth a bunch of money. On top of that is some tools here. So flat screwdrivers and red-handled screwdrivers now are worth a ton. make sure you pick these up. The black screwdrivers push 30K regularly. Now we're seeing 40, 50K. And the red screwdrivers are pushing 20K, but usually in the 15s. So they're worth bringing out. And the reason is because you use these to craft circuit boards, amongst other things, which is also why the gas analyzers are worth keeping now. You're seeing these things well over 25 and into 30 all the time. So they meet that 12.5 per slot requirement at 2 slots. Some new ones to the fold here that we're going to talk about is paper. Now, paper has gotten really expensive. This thing used to not be worth taking. I see this as being real expensive now simply because of the filter craft. So you use these to craft filters in your hideout, in your laboratory, which we'll jump over there to a real quick look. You can see right here, it makes your water filter. So that's where your paper price is being driven by. Now, the next up is toothpaste. Now, this is kind of a weird one. You're going to see this go as low as 8, 9, 10K, and then sometimes be as high as 30K. And this happens entirely around the resets with therapist. So when therapist resets on her thick case, when she gets close, so right now it's 1 hour and 33, but once this gets to like 30 minutes, you're going to see toothpaste start ticking up and up and up and up. And that's because people are buying them to trade this thick case. And I think I'll be able to show you in the flea market here. We'll do a required search, close barters. So that's the barter, and that's what you see it. So if you keep toothpaste and list them for 20K, you're probably going to sell them. Now, next up is syringes, NaCl, and sodium. These are all 3 worth keeping. Syringes kind of go up and down, but you can usually sell them for 13 to 15K. You'll see them as low as 7 or 8. So just sit on them and sell them at the higher price and you'll be gold. Now, the reason I bring up NaCl or saline solution is because this can be easily confused with others in the game. Not necessarily because how it looks, but it's a solution. So the H2O2, the hydrogen peroxide, not worth keeping. Saline solution, worth keeping. So you can see 6,000, 7,000 here versus the 30 to 40,000 that this sells for. So just keep that in mind that the NaCl is worth it and the H2O2 is not. And then lastly, sodium. This is used in your bleach craft and some other stuff. Again, a great little 1 slot. And I usually, if I find it, this is one of the first things that goes into my secure container, because even if I die with it, I can use it to make bleach. Now, moving on to some ammo. One of the things to show you is SP13 is worth a fortune. So if you're finding this doing cash runs or searching weapon boxes, even 6, 7 rounds is worth hanging on to and selling. And if you're like me, I have an ammo box just for selling ammo. I throw all the ammo I find into here, and as it gets bigger and bigger stacks, I actually crafted the 7N31, but as I get ammo to sell, I sell it in big stacks. Works out the best. Next thing is KS23 ammo. We're going to do a link search here and look at the ammo prices for this. So your barricade rounds sell for 3,000 to 4,000. Star rounds sell for 30,000 to 40,000. Shrap 10s, 1,000. Shrap 25s, 1,000. You always want to keep any KS23 ammo you find. It's worth keeping. It's just a huge stack item. Same thing for the most part with P90 ammo or the 5.7 ammo. When you go look into the ammo chart, more often than not, the ammo is worth a fortune. There's a few rounds that aren't worth keeping, but it's hard to remember. So if you're good at remembering which ones not to keep and don't, great. Otherwise, if you find P90 ammo, just hang on to it because it's almost always worth selling. And then lastly is this 50 cal bullet 12 gauge shell. It's got a little 50 cal round crammed into here. For whatever reason, I think it's an accuracy boost. I've never personally used this round, but I think it's like a poor man's AP20, which it isn't really poor because it's expensive, but you've seen these go through the roof with prices. You get them, keep them. Great little bullet to sell. And then lastly, I bring up mags. Yes, if you find mags in raid, great. But the more important thing is if you find firearms, especially M1As, MDRs, MP9s, the DVL. These mags can sell for a fortune and sometimes even more than the gun. Right now, you're seeing MP9 mags go for upwards of 30K. And the PMAG here, and this comes in SR25s and MDRs, the RSASs have them. You can sell these things from 25 to 30,000 as well. So when you get a gun that's found in raid, make sure you pull the mag out and sell it separately. Because even like the DVL, right now they're a little price cheap, but you can see these things push 15,000 when they sell out. Now into kind of a middle area. Now this is an area you can or cannot keep. I just want to bring it up to point it out. Zibbos, G-Phones, Elites, tape. These things can be worth over that 12.5, but more often than not, they're less as of lately. But small changes in price can swing these. So just keep an eye out when you're playing on these 4 items. They're not always worth keeping. Sometimes they are. What I do is I usually pick them up just out of force of habit, and then they sit in my Lucky Scav junk box for 4 or 5 days till the prices come up. Now, the last group of items we're going to talk about is stuff not to keep. Now, again, this isn't if you have an empty backpack. This is if your backpack's full and you have one of these, you should probably throw it out in exchange for other loot. And for the most part, it's it's any of these 4 or bigger slot items, they're not worth keeping anymore. They just don't hold the price. Motors, tool sets, and power supply units at their 4 slots, barely even, some of them are 5, 6K. Like in CPSUs now, we're going for 20,000. And even batteries, which used to be a fortune. These things used to be a gold mine to find. You know, they're selling for 8K a slot now, if that even. So these big items just aren't worth the space they take up. With the fuel crisis being over, you've seen matches, crickets, and we were talking the H2O2s in this group as well, but matches and crickets have come back into their normal price ranges and they're not worth taking anymore. And it doesn't just apply to the hunter matches. The classic matches are the same thing. You know, they hover somewhere between 7,000 and 9,000. However, if you're a hoarder, maybe you're sitting on these things for a future fuel wipe when they might become valuable again. Also, lunchboxes and MREs. If you pick these up, you're better off just eating them than taking them out of raid because they're usually not worth very much money taken out. So I don't hang on to them. This one's crafted. That's why it's found in raid. And I usually prefer other loot. And then lastly, onto valuable items. Now, while it can be exciting to find things like clocks and cats and safes, the problem is they're just not worth taking out. A cat doesn't even sell for 30,000. Now you're talking 25. You can get 28 sometimes, but that's not 10,000 a slot even. Same thing with clocks. These things are under 40K. So now you're talking 8,000 a slot. And then horses and chainlets are by themselves aren't even worth 10,000. So they're not even hardly worth taking out a raid. Now, one thing I skipped over that I'm going to jump back in again is the RAM. You might have noticed. Now, the reason I skipped over this is because RAM it's worth keeping, obviously, but I would not sell it right now. If you get these found in raid, I would sit on them. VPXs have gotten kind of cheap, so people stopped crafting them, but I think they're going to swing back the other direction. So I'm hanging on to all the RAM I find for a future date when I think they're going to be worth 30, 35, maybe 40K again to sell them for a little bit more. But that's just me. Well, that wraps up the video. I appreciate you watching. Make sure you hit that like button because it helps out the channel a bunch. And subscribe for future content. We also have a Discord, links down in the description, that you can come join. We're filling up with a bunch of chill people who just love to play Tarkov. If you're looking to support the channel in other ways, we've launched a Patreon with some benefits like access to a Discord channel, constantly updated spreadsheet for my hideout calculations, and some other things if you want to go check it out over there. Lastly, thanks for your support on YouTube. It means the world to me and I greatly appreciate every one of you. So with that, we'll wrap it up, and we'll see you in Tarkov.